Have you ever read something in Paul's letters and thought, wait, did Jesus actually say that? If so, you're not alone. Millions of Christians have wrestled with the same question, because at first glance, some of Paul's teachings seem to clash with Jesus' words. But is this a real contradiction, or is there something deeper going on? Today, we're diving into the most controversial passages, uncovering the truth behind the tension. And, most importantly, how this could actually strengthen your faith. 1. The tension no one talks about. You've probably heard Jesus say, love your enemies. But then Paul writes, if possible, live at peace with everyone. Sounds similar, right? But what about when Paul says, hand this man over to Satan, 1 Corinthians 5 verse 5? Or when he tells slaves to obey your earthly masters, Ephesians 6 verse 5? Did Jesus ever say anything like that? The answer might surprise you. When Jesus said, love your enemies, he was speaking to oppressed Jews under Roman rule, people who had every reason to seek revenge. His radical command flipped the script on power. But Paul's instruction to hand this man over to Satan was not about personal vengeance. It was a last resort church discipline tactic for unrepentant sexual immorality. The difference? Jesus addressed individuals in daily life. Paul addressed church leadership dealing with systemic sin. Both approaches reflect the same heart, protecting the vulnerable while leaving room for repentance. And about slavery, Jesus never explicitly condemned it because his mission was not political revolution. Instead, he undermined oppression by elevating the marginalized, women, Samaritans, tax collectors. Paul did the same by telling masters to treat slaves with fairness. Their methods differed, but their goal, dismantling injustice through transformed hearts, was identical. 2. The law versus grace debate. Jesus said, do not think I have come to abolish the law. But Paul wrote, you are not under the law but under grace. On the surface, this looks like a direct contradiction. But here's what most people miss. Jesus was speaking to Jews under the Old Covenant, while Paul was explaining the New Covenant to Gentiles. Context changes everything. Jesus' statement about not abolishing the law. He was showing that no one could perfectly keep it, 23-24. This was not a contradiction but a progression. Jesus laid the groundwork. Paul built the house. The key is recognizing audience. Jesus spoke to Jews still under the Old Covenant. Paul wrote to mixed congregations navigating the New. When Paul said, you are not under the law, he meant its condemnation, not its moral foundation. Even Paul quoted Jesus' ethical teachings. 3. The surprising harmony. This is where things get really interesting. Both Jesus and Paul taught that love fulfills the law. Both emphasized faith over works. And both warned against hypocrisy. The real difference? Audience and emphasis, not core theology. Take forgiveness. Jesus forgave the adulterous woman. Both prioritized restoration over punishment. Or consider faith. Jesus praised the centurion's faith. Their unity is clearer when you see Paul as Jesus' interpreter, applying his teachings to new contexts. Even their clashing views on wealth align. Jesus told the rich young ruler to sell everything. Why? Jesus' command exposed the ruler's idolatry. Paul focused on heart posture. Same principle, tailored responses. 4. The slavery controversy. Paul's instructions to slaves are some of the most criticized today. But consider this. Jesus never directly condemned slavery either. Does that mean he approved of it? Of course not. Both were working within their cultural context while planting seeds of radical change. Paul's letter to Philemon, for example, subtly undermines the entire system. Slavery in the Roman Empire was not race-based like later systems. It was often debt-driven or war-related, sometimes voluntary for social mobility. Paul's instructions to slaves. This quietly undermined the entire institution. Jesus' silence on slavery mirrors his approach to other systemic evils. He did not launch political campaigns, but transformed relationships. By eating with tax collectors, Luke 19 verses 1-10, and healing Roman centurion's servants, Matthew 8 verses 5-13. He modeled a kingdom where social barriers crumbled through love. 5. Women in the church. Jesus welcomed women as disciples. How do we reconcile this? First, recognize that Paul also praised female leaders like Phoebe and Priscilla. The key is understanding specific situations, like chaotic worship services in Corinth, rather than universal rules. Paul's apparent restrictions on women. Scholars suggest he was addressing specific issues in Ephesus, where false teachers targeted wealthy women, 1 Timothy 5 verses 13 to 15, not issuing universal bans. Meanwhile, Jesus' inclusion of women as disciples, Luke 8 verses 1 to 3, and first witnesses to his resurrection, John 20 verses 1 to 18, was culturally explosive. The harmony? Both elevated women in a patriarchal world. Paul's practical instructions protected fledgling churches from chaos, while his actions, like partnering with Priscilla in teaching Apollos, Acts 18 verse 26, proved his commitment to women's leadership. 6. The real game changer. Here's what changes everything. Jesus and Paul both 6. Paul said, "No one comes to the Father except through him." Their mission was identical, just expressed differently for different audiences. Paul's famous faith alone statement. Their shared mission shines in Acts 9 verse 15, where Jesus commissions Paul to reach Gentiles. Paul did not reinvent the gospel. He fulfilled Jesus' Great Commission, Matthew 28 verse 19, by bridging cultural gaps. 7. Why this matters for you. If you've ever felt torn between Jesus' teachings and Paul's letters, you're not alone. But instead of seeing tension, you can now see depth. The early church needed both Jesus' foundation and Paul's application. And so do we. Modern readers often miss that Paul's letters are occasional, written to fix specific problems. His harsh words for Judaizers. Both knew when to wield a scalpel versus a bandage. The takeaway? Don't flatten their teachings into sound bites. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and Paul's epistles are two parts of one story, like a doctor diagnosing a disease. 8. The most misunderstood passage, faith without works is dead. But James was addressing fake faith, while Paul was attacking legalism. They're two sides of the same coin, both essential for a balanced faith. James' faith without works is dead, but James attacked dead faith, claiming to believe while ignoring the poor. Paul attacked works-based salvation, trusting rituals like circumcision. Both agreed, real faith transforms behavior. Jesus settled this first. By their fruit you will recognize them. His parable of the sheep and goats. 9. How to read the Bible without confusion. The solution is simple. Read each passage in its original context. Ask, who was speaking? To whom? Why? When you do, apparent contradictions often vanish. For example, Jesus, sell your possessions. Paul's the love of money is a root of evil. A practical tip, read Paul's letters as responses. Corinth's chaos. 10. The big picture, Christianity is not about picking between Jesus and Paul. It's about seeing how both reveal God's heart. Jesus showed us God's character. Paul showed us how to live it out. So what do you think? Have you ever struggled with these passages? Let me know in the comments. And if this video helped, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the best conversations start when we ask tough questions and seek answers together.